Today we are looking at civilian population, civilian protection and the right to security in the Northwest and Southwest region. And also we shall be looking at the right, what the security right and what also the law states about the protection of civilian, who is a civilian, and also what needs to be done in terms of reducing the violence in the Northwest and Southwest region. Here in the studio we are joined by someone who is very, very instrumental, Senior Barrister Nkea, who is here with us. And Senior Barrister Nkea, thanks for joining us and happy Sunday.
Thank you, Jarvis. It's always a pleasure to be here. And this time around, looking perhaps 6-7 years down the lane after the crisis, one would want to look at this issue for discussion today as a very critical issue. It's incisive, and I think it is something that is a discussion that is long overdue. So I'm looking forward to, sharing ideas with the other panelists.
Thank you very much, Senior Barrister Nkea. And also we in the studio, we are also joined by Dr. Mabel Noko Ipus Ndang. Doctor, thanks for joining us and happy Sunday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jarvis. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think it's going to be a very wonderful session, considering the current state of things and where we find ourselves. And we know that after today's session, knowledge will be shared, opinions, and we believe that would in one or two ways influence a lot of things. And thank you, and also I think it will be a wonderful time with the panelists here all present. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Also in the studio, we are joined by Bison Christel, who is a member of the Movement for Democracy, Development and Transparency. Bison Christel, Arena.
Actually come from the section where you say
Echena.
Echisari.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here, and I believe it's going to be an awesome session. And also we're going to educate every person and pray that by the end of the session, every person to at least learn something new and foster civilian protection in our country.
Okay, Gabriel Yagaka is here with us today also to look at this issue. Gabriel Yagaka, thanks for joining us. Happy Sunday.
Thank you, Mr. Jarvis. It's a habit to be here. And I'm very much elated to have returned today to discuss on one of those topics that is really plaguing our serenity, the crisis in the Northwest and in the Southwest region, and what can we propose to the public? How do we navigate the nuances? How do we survive amidst the odds? That's why we're here, and I hope that we will be at the height to be able to give one or two statements that can advance the situation.
I begin with you, Senior Barrister Nkea. You are someone who is vast in terms of looking at conflict across the world, and also with your rich international experience. I want us to come down to the laws on security rights. What does the law state in terms of security rights? You have also been a judge.
Generally, Jarvis, when you're talking about security rights, it's a very broad concept. It's a very broad concept because you're looking at security, especially from the perspective of international human rights law. You want to look at it from the dimension of international security. You have to look at it from the dimension of individual security. You have to look at it from the dimension of national security. And all these things have their own moderating factors. And you of course, you will accept with me that once you start talking about security, you are talking about you presuppose that there are some tensions. When you talk about international security, you're trying to infer that there is some interstate tension, some intrastate tension that may have international consequences on the respect of human rights. You talk about individual security, you start looking at those things, what are those tensions between the state or non-state actors and the individual that may adversely impact on their rights. Then, of course, you would have again to look at not necessarily individuals, but also there could be some entities within the state that also would want to get the protection of that kind of enjoy those security rights. And then again, you look at it generally, is it always the case that the state, or when is it that it will be permissible for the state to deprive you of certain rights, especially in terms of security? And this is what has become the defining point in international human rights discourse with respect to security rights, whether, at what stage, at what time would the state be able to deprive an individual from the right of security of person, that is integrity of person and all that. And of course, as you will see during our discussions here, there are instances regulated by law, regulated by the constitution of this country, where international human rights, the right to security of person, could actually be limited, you could actually be deprived of that right. And when we talk about security of the person in this case, we are talking about your right to not be arrested arbitrarily, the right to not be detained arbitrarily, the right to not be tortured arbitrarily. And torture in this sense is broad because it involves acts of intimidation, not just physical torture, but it could also be mental torture. It could also be sexual torture. And it is varied. But again, the law is permissible that in certain circumstances, the state could be permitted to deprive an individual of the right to security of persons. And those cases are clearly mapped out in the constitution of this country. But again, perhaps we will have to see the source of the application of international human rights law in the country here. You discover that is found in the preamble of the Constitution. And when you look at the preamble of the Constitution, they are listed there. Treaties that have been duly ratified by Cameroon, they list some of them, the Convention on Civil and Political Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and all those things, which are given primacy over our local laws by virtue of Article 65 of the Constitution. So when you look Article 65 and 45 of the Constitution together, it gives the impression that these laws take precedence. They are part and parcel of the Constitution, and therefore they take precedence over our local laws. Now, what this means in essence is that when we have administrators who are charged with the management of movement of persons, movement of goods, we have military authorities who are in charge with the security of the national territory, act in certain ways. Then we start asking the question whether their actions are actually in conflict with the law or in accordance with the law. And I was trying to make this difference that there is, and it is permissible under the law, the Constitution states it clearly, that the only time when a person could be deprived of his right to security of person is when there is a derogation, right? You are asking yourself whether there is a derogation, a permissible derogation. And in this case, the Constitution makes it clear, international human rights law makes it clear that before, for example, the right to torture is prohibited. It has even attained the status of what you call jus cogens. It is prohibited at all cost. But what about the right to not be arbitrarily arrested, the right to not be arbitrarily detained? And we're talking arbitrary detention here means that any detention that exceeds the legal limits automatically becomes arbitrary. If the police has a right to keep you for 24 hours and they keep you for 48 hours, no matter the purpose of the arrest, it becomes arbitrary. and therefore your right to security of person is interfered at that point. But the like I was saying, international law recognizes exceptions where some of these limited cases of derogations could become permissible, and that is when, for example, the state involved has made certain declarations. In the context of this country, if you look at the security laws, what they call the state of emergency laws of 1990, they clearly state that a state of emergency is one. You have also a situation where the country is under a siege. That is also one. And all this, then of course, there is a new narrative that is emerging, what is called a state of necessity, where the state could act to deprive individuals of their rights because, and national security is always the reason why states justify the deprivation of international human rights on their citizens or the derogation thereof. So in this scenario, what we will want to ask is whether in the context of the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest
Yes,
region,
I was just about to go there to ask you now, where does the conflict in the Northwest and Southwest fit in the explanation?
Yes, that is what I'm trying to explain now. If you look at what we have in the Northwest and Southwest regions, you discover that the entire region is militarized. Movement is restrained. People are arbitrarily arrested, arbitrarily detained. As I speak to you, I have the case of a mental patient who was arrested on the 1st of October. He was just loitering on the street. They arrested him. He was not with anything on him. They just arrested him, picked him loitering on the street. He's been kept at the Legion from that day till today. I have been there personally a few times, and they kept asking for one document or the other to justify that he's a mental patient. And usually the case is that people who are mentally not balanced hardly possess a national identity card. So you should see a myriad of problems. That they accept medical attention to the young man while in their facility, right? They come and give the young man medication, but you see, they don't want to let him go. And so you start asking yourself whether the detention now is for some other pecuniary purposes or otherwise. And in the case I was trying to say, in the Northwest and Southwest regions today, it is militarized. We all know that it is militarized because there is an armed struggle, as you would say. But is it lawful for us to operate under this militarized system without conforming with the law? The Constitution says there is supposed to be a state of emergency which should be declared by the head of state by a decree.
Yeah.
That has not been done. Now, if the head of state had made a pronounced, decreed a state of emergency, then all the militarization and the military
and the instrument that they are using now,
the military activism in the Northwest and Southwest would have been in order. If the head of state had also decreed that there was a state of siege in the Northwest and Southwest, that would have also, conformed with the law. But he has not done so. And so you start asking yourself, under what instrument, what is the state of law in the Northwest and Southwest region today? And for me, I believe, and I will say it, I mean, that's my training, that's my calling as a lawyer, that the military activities in the Northwest and Southwest are outside
the context of the law.
Yes, they are operating outside the law. Now, you will hear some people will argue that beyond the state of siege, beyond the state of emergency, there is a third layer, which is called a state of necessity, which is another permissible ground for the state to derogate from its obligation under international law. But a state of necessity, as you would suppose, It's a principle that allows that when there is an imminent danger, something that the state does not need to go and sit in parliament, pass laws, legislate before things, to avoid a very imminent danger. The law and what you call the military forces can react immediately, right, with a view to regularizing it in due course. Yes. So that is when you want to preempt some state of immediate danger.
And Barrister, and as we speak, the upper and lower house have not had this discussion.
That is what I'm saying to you, Mr. Jarvis, that you see, sometimes you wonder whether we have members of parliament, you wonder whether we have senators, and you wonder whether we even have, we are even a country that is governed by the rule of law. You wonder. And if you were to come to the southwest region where I reside, where I work as a lawyer, you would agree with me that when the judiciary is strong, when the judiciary is strong, when the judiciary is a power as is contemplated and conceived under the Constitution, then the judiciary should be able to act as check and balances to some of these excesses.
Clear the oversight.
But it is unfortunate that in the region where where I come from, the executive arm has an overbearing influence. I say overbearing influence on the judicial arm. And so you have, the effect is that there is declining confidence in the courts. When I talk about the judiciary, I'm not talking about the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office is definitely part of the executive arm of government. But where you have a situation where the prosecutor general, for example, has an overbearing influence on the courts. I have a practical case. It concerns your colleague journalist. And this is where we talk about security of persons. It concerns your journalist, your colleague journalist. I am in court, I'm doing a case. A man, he's charged with rash driving or for driving without an insurance. And get the scenario. And then you get what I'm trying to say. He's driving without an insurance. Now, somebody on a motorcycle with two other persons on it. A motorcycle is licensed to carry just one extra person. But there are two extra persons, which means that the rider of that motorcycle was already engaged in what we'll call in law dangerous activity.
Yeah.
And so whether he was licensed or not, and the effect of that dangerous activity is that the overloading, right, displaces you from control. And so they had a collision. Your colleague journalist, I'll call his name. Yannick. Funky Yannick. We go to court. Now he's charged with driving without an insurance, which is an offense, yes. It's a misdemeanor. The guy who was riding the bike has a cousin who is a magistrate attached to the Parquet General, a young man. I think his name is Tasha. I call names because these are facts that are verified.
Verifiable.
Now he gets to Yannick, who is my client, and says that he wants compensation because his cousin, his relative who is on the bike, is injured. And he's asking for 5 million francs. Yannick says, 5 million francs I cannot afford. And we get involved. We try to negotiate. And the next thing he does is that, anyway, Yannick is presented to the State Council, who remands him. Only the act for a misdemeanor, who remands him for an act that was not a flagrant délit.
Yeah.
He was not caught on the scene and taken to court. That was an act that had been like 3 months. It had happened like 3 or 4 months ago. I'm talking about the rule of law here. And takes him, remands him. That act of remand indicated to me that there was some other instruction coming to the state council. And the man is brought to court. We are still in the course of discussions. By the morning he is presented to court, we had assembled about 1 million francs, which we thought we could give to the victims. And I told him, plead guilty. I advised him, because statutorily the law says when you plead guilty, it's a mitigating circumstance for you. If it is, I said, plead guilty. He pleaded guilty. Now, on the face of the charge, it was discovered that there were victims involved. And I told the court that these victims have been in contact with me through their relative, who is a magistrate, who is standing out of the court there. And this is the demand they have made. We are not opposed to that demand. The court can enter that amount as compensation, even if it is 10 million. But we are praying that the court should proceed to give this man a suspended sentence and a fine to pay. Now the court in its wisdom said, well, it would like to see the victims and hear from them. So the court needed to adjourn the case. We pleaded and applied that the court now should grant bail to Yannick, because the adjournment was not at his instance. He was coming for, and that is not an offense for which a man must be remanded. The young magistrate ran to the Procureur General and told him that, you see, that court wants to give that man bail. The court grants the bail. In session, the court grants the bail. Orders a deposit of 1 million francs cash. That was the application we to the court. That we, even if it's 1 million francs, we can deposit cash to be sure that this man is not running away and you'll be present in the next session. The court made that order. This boy ran to the PG. We are still in court. The PG orders that the presiding magistrate should come to his chambers and see him. We are talking about
the rule of law.
The rule of law. The magistrate rises from court, walks into the PG's chambers. I followed him. He didn't notice that I was running after him. In fact, what he did was that he took, when he discovered that I was trying to trail him, he went through the direction of Bisek Bank, drove down, and came through Barrister Kumfa's office entrance. But I took the shortcut and I met with him while he was entering the PG. He stayed there like for 45 minutes. And when he came back, he refused to sign the release, the bail orders that he had granted. The following day and the following, so I wrote a letter to the PG that your action constitutes an interference with the bench, which is unlawful and impedes the rule of law. And when those are actions that constitutes now an interference with the integrity of the person, when his detention is now being influenced by reasons other than the law, extrajudicial reasons. And I told him that I do not know what that young magistrate has given you to push you into such a callous act of indiscretion. And I withdrew myself from the case. And I heard that your colleague was sentenced to, I don't know, 6 years or 3 years.
3 years.
3 years hard labor. That is an offense for which. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this to suggest to you that we are not in a state of law. We are in a state of rule by might, where a man who thinks he's stronger, a man who thinks that he has the military or at his discretion, he bends the law as he wants. And when we are in that state, then we forget about this concept of security of the person, because they can take you any minute, keep you anywhere. And of course, the courts will not be able to make a pronouncement whether that act is right or wrong.
That leads us, we're coming back to you, Senior Barrister. That leads us now to Dr. Mabel. Doctor, we are talking now, looking at civilian. Who is the civilian in terms of this? Because Barrister have talked about the fact that until in a condition of siege or state of emergency, that then the state can deprive you of certain rights to security. But as it stands now, we have not had that declaration. Nothing has been done. So now, who now is in charge of who now is a civilian, and also what is civilian protection as far as these two things are concerned?
Thank you very much, Mr. Jarvis. As I said earlier, that these are very sensitive topics, and these are very sensitive times as well. And
my lady friend should not be afraid. Because that's a caveat. These times are sensitive. Let me not say something here.
Well, of course, we are not politicians, but
of course, yes.
we cannot close our eyes to what is happening.
Political reality.
Exactly. So we want to be very objective and frank to things, particularly in line with what Senior Vice Nsungkikang said vis-a-vis the respect of the rule of law. It's very fundamental for every state. If as a nation you cannot guarantee the security of your people, then it becomes a problem and a cause for concern. Before we move into what civilian protection is all about and that, I first of all want us to address our minds to what is protection. Because if we don't first of all know what protection is, then how can we address our minds to what civilian protection is? Yeah. And of course we know protection is to keep safe from harm. So keeping safe from harm, it means that there is a responsibility to certain degree for certain actions, reactions, words, not to be done or to fail to do them. So when we talk about civilian protection under international humanitarian law, because where we find ourselves, of course, we know we cannot divorce our minds of the fact that there is some tension and conflicts going on. And so when we talk about civilian protection under international humanitarian law, we're looking at protecting civilians from direct harm or the effects and consequences of such harm. For example, if we know as a fact that people reside in, like Boya, for example, there is a need for that environment where inhabitants reside at to be free from enormous or imminent danger or hazards, things that can leave direct consequences, be it directly on the civilian or even the civilian environment. So when we are talking about civilian protection, we're not only looking at it as for an individual. We are equally looking at it as those consequences, those things that affect the environment, that prevents the safety or the habitation of people in that environment. And so we see that due to certain actions that have happened recently, people have moved from certain areas because they are no longer safe. We know of Ekona, those areas are you move along the stretch of road there, you wonder if people had ever stayed there. You wonder, because the environment is no longer safe. The civilians have been exposed to harm and danger. And even their environments, agriculture, they cannot even do farming, or they don't have basic means of survival any longer because of the characteristics of things.
You're making some very crucial points. And I just thought that perhaps you could elaborate who has the duty to provide that security.
I'm going to come there. But first of
all, that's why I said when you started and said these are sensitive times.
No, because we have to first of all know what is protection. Then we can now ascertain who has the responsibility or the degree of what measure of protection should be given. Yeah. We cannot talk about who is responsible without knowing what they are responsible for.
That's true.
So when moving, before I go to Senior Vice Nsungkikang's question, yes, I really want us to look at these issues very in-depthly, because, and when we are equally talking about Now, I want us to look at who a civilian is.
Yeah, who does is a civilian? Because we are caught within
Yes.
this web where they tell you that, you know, a civilian is someone who probably has no arms or has an arm. We are caught within this web because there's an aspect where...
Because, like he was talking about illegal arrest,
yes.
arbitrary arrest and detention and all of that, is because the probably the military goes into a quarter and picks up people and they say, oh, you are amber. I'm sorry to use that word here.
No, it's
yes, but it's because
allowed.
of the conception. You understand?
We are not in a state of emergency.
Yes, they go into the quartiers and they pick up young people, you know, students in UB universities. It's common. Sometimes young people even below the ages of 14, you know, they are arbitrarily arrested. Sometimes they don't have ID cards, but you know, the narratives change.
If they cannot give money instantly.
Yes, the narratives change that you were involved in so and so activities. Because I believe that there is a need to clearly define or spell out who a civilian is. Because this group of people warrant protection. They deserve protection. And a civilian, if we look at it clearly as per international humanitarian law, these are persons who are not involved
in the armed
conflict. Okay, now how do you know that this person is not involved in the armed conflict? Okay, we have a situation and everybody is here. How do we differentiate? You have those people who have clearly held out arms in the open,
or even held out themselves.
Yes.
To
and if we look at the definition, it would go further to say that these are people. I'll use the word belligerents. Are people who, because the opposite is a civilian. A belligerent, somebody who holds out arms in the open.
Okay.
A civilian doesn't do that. Or you are subject to a command authority, like we have the military, they are subject to a government. But now, the command authority must not be an authority recognized by the adverse party. That's why we cannot divorce ourselves of the fact that we are in a conflict zone, because the fact that the other groups are not recognized by the state doesn't mean that they don't have a command authority. They have somebody, and they tell us lockdowns on Mondays, they tell us don't move here, and people, because of security reasons,
fear.
Yes, that's it. The consequence is don't put terror on the people. So there should be a consistent care.
But we had a situation. We had a situation for this lockdown issue where nothing was happening in Moluku, but we were told that soldiers just went to the street and were shooting in the air. There was a lockdown period, shooting in the air.
And you see that sometimes, yes, because you see that sometimes because of that, you know, those who have hidden themselves, they take up arms in defense, and because especially if they hear rumors, they want to retaliate and all of that, they would be considered as belligerents. They are no longer civilians. So for no reason, if you think you need protection as a civilian, should you pick up arms in defense of yourself?
Barrister Mabel, there is something important. You keep mentioning arms. You know, it's a discourse, and when I look at some administrative acts from, for example, the Minister of Territorial Administration, banning the purchase of machetes, cutlasses, and
some
all
rods.
these
I
things.
saw that too.
Some rods.
Yeah, so I mean, would you say, in the context of the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions,
That anybody who has cutlass,
anybody who is found in possession
of cutlass,
of a cutlass is presumed to be armed?
Yeah, I mean that's very,
Because it's a very dicey
Yes.
thing. Because also, yes, people have started using machetes to, you know, to do
Yes.
things that would even pass for a gun. So I'm just trying to incite the debate in another direction, because
I'm happy senior barrister brought that, because we have probably, you know, with Moya, Ekona, and the rest, somebody picks up a machete, is going to the farm. Maybe there have been an attack in that area some weeks ago, and retaliation is coming, and you get that person with the machete going to a farm, and you could, what context?
And let me tell you one thing that I know as a fact. I started my practice in Muyuka, so that is a farming environment. You could see one farmer carrying 3 different types of cutlasses to the farm.
Yes.
If he's going to perhaps prune his palm, there is a particular machete for that. If he's doing clearing, there's a particular machete for that. If he's doing
digging the storm, those heavy
those
storms.
digs,
Yes.
there's a different machete for that. So if he's going to the farm and he's going to approach an area, his work description for that day requires that he should arm himself with those materials, and he's going to the farm, and then he meets a military man on the road. He sees him with 3 machetes, well sharpened and looking clean for business, and he tells the man, come here, come here, come here. No, you see that these are the things that raises tension in society. The farming community already becomes terrified, that you see, we don't even know again what to do. And yeah, so these are things that, in debates like this, we should make them clear.
That's exactly. And to answer his worry is the fact that the law makes it clear where there is a doubt as to if that person is a civilian or not, it is presumed
that is a civilian.
He's a civilian.
Until proven otherwise.
Yes, so you cannot see a man going to his farm carrying cutlasses and his farming tools, and you presume that no, he's going to plant something in the bush.
No, that is going to take cover.
No, that it is important because he's very correct. Apart from now, we can even say there was a man going to the farm and carrying the weapons. There was a reason for him to attract some attention on him. What about the people who don't carry anything and are arrested? Like after the first October incident of what happened in Munya, where a taxi got burnt in Munya, there was a serious raid. Young people picked up.
Of all ages.
Yes. Picked up.
Minor, junior.
Yes.
Indiscriminate arrest.
Under the, the thing like there was an incident that happened and they could be. No, it is presumed. When you cannot ascertain if that person is a belligerent or not, it is presumed that that person is a civilian. Until there are factors to prove otherwise.
And still within the context that it has not been declared a state of emergency or an area under siege.
Exactly.
No, you see, Dr. Mabel, to be fair to these military people sometimes, right? And I think that is where the issue lies. Because 90% of the time, when you see them do this indiscriminate raiding like that, picking people indiscriminately, it's because they assume that these people have failed to give information. That they know those who are involved in these activities, those who are taking up arms, those who are fighting, but they are refusing to report. And that is why if you go to the military court, go to the military tribunal in Boya today, do an assessment of the cases that are dealt with in that court, you will see that 86% conviction of cases are those for failure to report.
Okay.
That's true.
Now, doctor, who protects these civilians?
Very important. We know as a fact that the state is the duty bearer. The civilians are the right holders. We belong to a nation. The government has a responsibility to protect civilians. But I will not want to leave it solely on the government, because you and I have a responsibility to protect ourselves equally. Yes, but I will say clearly that the state has an obligation incumbent on them to protect civilians. So just as Senior Bazakia was saying that if I cannot go to a law court and receive justice for my case, the principle of fair trial, and I'm tortured in the process, I'm arbitrarily arrested, who do I run to if I cannot run to the state? Where do I find security if it is not in the government? So the government has a primary responsibility and obligation to ensure the protection of civilians. We cannot totally remove our eyes from the fact that they've done something, but we are saying that amidst the current situation, there is much that needs to be done, because the civilians are the ones greatly affected more than the state.
Okay.
But added to that, the civilians themselves have an obligation. You have a responsibility to move along with your ID card, so they should not pick you around and say you're not in possession of it. You have a responsibility, for example, if you hear, okay, this one they are saying that country Sunday, this one says no, we should go out. you as an individual should be able to assess and your security is priority.
Doctor.
Should I go out or should I stay?
Doctor, down. You are bringing us to a dilemma. They say lock your shop or burn them. The other side say open your shop or close them permanently for you. Now, where does the civilian fit and the rule of law in that? And we have shops that have been sealed because of the fact that this situation came in. Is that not part of protection of civilians and properties?
You see, Mr. Jarvis, that is that's an equation that expresses the complete frustration of the civilian population in the southwest and northwest provinces or regions, because the ghost authority that imposes ghost town, you don't see them, you get their consequences. The civilian authorities have failed to protect the people against the consequences of ghost town. Yes,
of the ghost authority.
Yes, of the ghost authority. They have failed, because if we had a situation where shops were open in Moliko the whole day in defiance of the ghost authorities, and the burnings that occur or the shootings that occur, the government prevented them or arrested those who were in the act of committing the shooting. I tell you this, on the last Friday before the last ghost town came to an end, I bypassed some 2 young boys. I just lost my brother. I was going down to Limbe to condole. I passed some 2 young boys. There were 3 of them in the car, and they were shot down around the My 14 area. Yeah, they were shot there. 2 of them died on the spot. Now, what do you expect as the reasonable action of a civilian man when he hears that there should be no movement,
and somebody was killed
from the ghost authorities, that there should be no movements on the street on this day,
and there was a consequence?
What did the government do to prevent that consequence? And what sustainable measures have the government taken to ensure that the ghost authorities don't exist? Those are the things that we should keep asking ourselves.
So which means we are chasing the shadow.
We are chasing the shadow. The issue is not the civilian man and the shop.
That's it.
The issue is the ghost authority, the man who imposes the parallel authority, or who imposes the parallel instructions.
Because the civilians are victims of those consequences.
In fact, so you victimize the civilians twice. And it is worse if they are victimized by their own government. The man who is supposed to guarantee security, the man who is supposed to provide security,
they go and seal their shop.
Seals your shop for trying to provide self-security, because the law also says that you should be able to take measures to mitigate your harm.
That's it.
If I see that there is a burning house here, or people are burning tires on the street, and I run into that fire, I'll be a stupid person.
Yes, that's it.
So we have an obligation, the civilians have an obligation to mitigate their insecurity.
Okay, now I'll come to Doctor. With this scenario, where should they see? Because Senior Vice just said they have the right first as a civilian to protect themselves.
That's what I said.
From that consequence,
the civilians, they both have an
obligation. Now, what properties are to be protected during this period?
I would say that indeed it's very important to know this. The properties that ought to be protected are the damaged properties now. Yes, we find that some schools are not going on. We find out that people are no longer dwelling in their houses. They've left. So civilian properties are supposed to be protected.
You see,
their dwellings, schools, churches, even the environment. Yes, for no reason should those those places be a tool.
Okay.
Yes, a tool. So that's why I said earlier that for no reason should a strategy or a warfare or a belligerent strategy be that you want to inflict terror or fright because you think that if you attack a school it will prevent, or if you do this. No, Rather, those people need protection. Just as there are emphasis on the protection of women, lactating mothers, children below the age of 14 who need to go to school. The law even provides that there is a need for such children, for their education to be facilitated. That's where we find ourselves that, as Nsungkikang was saying, there is a need for the government to guarantee that. When IDPs are displaced, when people are displaced, how are children below these school-going ages, their education facilitated for them to receive proper education?
Okay.
Their futures are just tempered with.
If I may add, Barrister Mabel, you will discover that under international humanitarian law, there are certain areas that should not be attacked at any
completely.
Yes.
Okay. Barrister, and now before coming to the other members, I'll be coming back to you to ask probably the recommendations that you people will be giving as far as this situation is concerned in terms of how we can handle it. Now, but before then, I have this quick one for you. You focus on civilian population and that the government has this responsibility. And you said we are in a dicey situation, so one has to be careful,
yes,
and that we don't also have to play a bit of ignorance towards the political situation. There, I'm still, as a journalist, I'll ask you this question: how fair, on a scale of 10, has this protection been done from the government since the crisis moved to an armed conflict?
Objectively,
Zero
I would say 6. I would say 6. I would say 6 because I would say 6 because the institutions are actually in place. The military is there to protect, and it's not solely on the government. It's also partly on the civilians.
Okay.
But on a further note, we've seen that rather the masses have become praised and victims. The civilian environment have become harbours for this outrageous.
Yes.
Okay, Barrister.
While
briefly, sir, come to yoga. And
I will rather say this. I agree with Barrister Mabel that, you know, in some areas, government's responsibility has been 6 on 10. In some localities, it has been 0, 0, 10.
Okay, Barrister.
Now, let me give you this example. And I say this for a reason, and that is why when you put it together, you will say that the government has failed completely. I say so because the government does not have an obligation only to protect those in authority. The obligation is to protect the vulnerable man on the street. And so when you come to Boya, for example, there is a green belt, there is a blue zone, there is a red zone. Who are those who live in the green belt? That's where the governor lives. That is where the Legion commander lives. That is where the vice chancellor lives. Right? That is the safest zone. And so that is where they do 100% protection. Come down to Moliko, where the ordinary man lives, is a volatile region. And that is where I say the government has failed, because the government owes responsibility not to those in authority, but to the civilian population. Go to Ekata, go to Munyenge.
Lekona Munya?
Go there.
Okay,
it is deserted.
We'll be coming back.
So
to
where
you.
Is the state?
We'll be coming back to you on this. Let's take on some message. Let's come to Gabriel and of course Christelle. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday to you, a young Brittany, watching the program. I want to say happy Sunday to you, a young Brittany. This one says, good afternoon, sir. I am a keen listener of your program. I admire the way by Nsungkikang just explained the situation that one of your colleagues found himself, and it has reminded me of a friend who was caught in his house somewhere around Isokolo in Limbe last September for suspected, in quote, to a suspected thief that was taken at the Central Police Station in Limbe. The young man, a bike rider with a wife and 4 children, has spent close to 360 days in the cell despite several pleas from his family members. Even as we speak, he is still there. The question I wish to find out from Barrister Nsungkikang whether someone suspected of theft can be kept in a cell for close to that number of days. It seems the family members that something serious is working behind. Something serious working behind the scene for this young man to be detained. Samuel writing from Douala. Barrister will reply to you later after the other speaker must have. I will take back the message. Hello, dear panel. I'm following the discussion, and it is indeed an intelligent one. May I please suggest the members slow down with the interruption, allow the panelists to develop their point fully. When okay, thank you very much. This is coming from Moses. Writing says, is Moses following House of Commons in Bepanda? How can civilians feel protected when trained by the trained by the military in which they should trust? I don't understand that message. Hopefully we'll get to you. And now let me come to you, Gabriel. We have been talking about civilians, and this also involves the youth, because most of the times it is, if you do a survey, you realize that most of those caught between the crossfire are young people like yourself and myself, from the case of Wazizi, a young man, right up to all those who are experiencing. So basically on this aspect now, I want to ask you this question on what a youth is, and also what they ought to do in terms of ensuring civilian protection, what young people from all these affected areas need to do in terms of ensuring the protection of civilians.
All right, I have listened keenly the first two speakers, and I would like to first of all start by trying to stress on a certain dichotomy in the definition of a civilian. Most people define civilians as simply people who do not pick up arms. It has a standard definition in international humanitarian law. But there is something there that we don't really look at it all the time. There's a distinction between a civilian and a non-combatant. A non-combatant is not necessarily a civilian. In war, for example, the military, doctor, and all other personnel that are taking care of the military forces or the armed groups are not civilians, though they are not taking part in the hostilities. And so you must see that the underlying point there is the act of taking part in hostilities, not just the carrying of arms. And there are many ways in which you can take part in hostilities. Some take part in hostilities by being spies. Some take part in hostilities by, you know, the type of communications that they vehiculate on social media. Some take part in hostilities by openly taking political stands that are maybe that threaten the serenity of the atmosphere. And so when you look at all these classes of people, they cease from being civilians. They become non-combatants, not necessarily combatants, and therefore they dislodge from themselves those privileges which are given to them under the international humanitarian law. If you look at the 1958 commentaries of the International Committee of the Red Cross, they made a commentary on the 1949 Convention, and that was related to the protection of civilians and their rights to security. They said anybody in the enemy hands has a right to an international status in international humanitarian law. Either the person is a prisoner of war and by so doing is protected by the Third Convention, or the person is a civilian and is protected by the Fourth Convention, or the person is a non-combatant like the military personnel and is protected by the First Convention. So this aspect of civilianship should be clear, so that those people who, instead of maintaining neutrality, take now stands either with the authority in power, that's the government, or the other belligerent party who are feeling, who have a sense of indignation, cease to become the civilians and they are no more protected. Who are those, as they are discussed, the first two speakers have said, who are those to protect civilian protection? This is clearly the responsibility of the state. In its preamble, as Barrister Nsungkikang put it, and that preamble is part and parcel of the Constitution. We look at section 65. Now, what are those contents? The right to life, which is an inalienable right, the right, to fair judgment, and and all those other essential rights that all human beings must have been ratified, as I said, subject to reciprocity in sections 45, which means that the full duty in protecting civilians is that of the state. But that is not the narrative we are talking about. I look at the topic, it says civilian protection and right to security in the Northwest and Southwest. We are already in the storm. And in every situation of crisis, there is usually an act of Zabanism, that is excess use of power, either by the judiciary, as Barrister Kea pointed out with the PG, or by the military.
You can emphasize that again.
Yes.
It's a problem.
Yes, or with the military personnel. The question is, how do we survive amidst the odds? Like, yes, we have a government who is each and everyone has a perception. For the majority, for the preponderance, they are not playing their role as they ought to be. But how do we survive? Shall we continue to die? We need to find mechanisms to survive. And that is how we are asking ourselves, how do we protect ourselves as civilians? And I think the first thing is to understand the legal framework within which you can be protected. That is, once you become an analphabet, because once they produce, and many of the youths, as you said, and even the other generations, do not even know what it means to be protected, the laws and every other thing, the institutions where to direct themselves and everything. From there is already a problem. They need to first of all know what the law says. Now the second is what Dr. Mabel pointed out. The first step in protecting yourself as a civilian is to first of all respect the laws. When you say respect the laws, I will take a popular example which I always like to discuss about the child that was shot at checkpoint in Boya.
Chungwa Karolis.
Yes. Everybody, some people blame the woman, some people blame the gendarme officer. But I always ask myself the question, what prompted that woman not to even stop for a second? Because these people guide. In as much as we're talking about the military, they remain our brothers. Your brother is a military. My own brother is a military. So we have brothers in the two sides. Now, if she had stopped for a check, maybe
that was a misinformation. She was not stopped.
Okay.
She was not stopped. That was a deliberate misinformation.
Okay.
I'll
rectify that.
Yeah.
The second one I'm saying is, okay, now, in that situation, mob justice took the floor, and the gendarme officer was killed. What our law enforcement officers, those administrators who are supposed to ensure that the government is the third arm of the state, who are supposed to ensure that we are being protected. The Minister of Territorial Administration came out and vividly threatened the public. At some point in time when there was a time when you look at videos everywhere, somebody's boxing a police officer somewhere and everything around Cameroon, it was already as if it's a kind of
a new trend.
Yeah, it became a trend.
He came out and threatened, I cannot remember the exact statement of sending, is this snake, I cannot remember. Maybe like when you bite somebody, I don't know, he used something like that to say you shot. I mean, what sort of partiality is that? Of an arbitration that is not impartial.
No, but when you say arbitration, was he not acting in conformity in terms of stressing that people should not take laws into their own hands?
I am trying to say that.
Once that kind of thing happens, okay. you already discovered that there's a tension. What is the cause of this tension? That should be the first
to address the root cause of the tension.
Yes, and I wanted to come there. I raised that point because we're asking ourselves how to protect ourselves here, and the two camps are to blame. Now, when you say the mob justice is not tolerated normally, but why mob justice? When does it come in? It comes in when those to whom we have given ourselves to secure us failed in their exercise. If the population was reassured that they can believe in the sincerity of the judicial system, I think they would have allowed the judicial system and the administration to play their role. So it is a reminder to the government and the administration
that the system is failing.
They are not playing their role and the people don't believe in them again. So in ensuring civilian protection, let the judicial system first be very independent and be able to grant those inalienable rights that have been provided for in our preamble.
I think you have spoken for all of us. That is the underlying point. Where there is a breakdown of rule of law, everything goes bananas. Yes.
And then for the youths, as we were putting, anyway, if you look at the Cameroon National Youth Policy of 2006, it says that a youth is a citizen between the age of 15 to 35.
That's youth,
Youth, according to, because we see ministers, they call them youth, so I don't know if that definition is being respected, but I know.
Well, I've been told that is a state of mind.
Okay. No, we need to have a definition, and I'm saying according to the Cameroon National Youth Policy, that is the definition. The youths have an essential role to play, and unlike the other scenarios, as you pointed out, the belligerents on the two parties are predominantly youths, be it military or in the secessionists. They are mainly youths, which means that there is a problem somewhere at the level of the youths. When I listen to the question of what do the youths have to play, I think it's a more general question for everybody. But I may retell that question to say, why are the youths so engaged in radicalization? Because that's where the problem is. Why are they more engaged in radicalization? And this comes again to point fingers on the government. When unemployment takes the floor, you can begin to expect anarchy. You can begin to expect people who are ready to make themselves available, this time around not in the right purpose, but in the other side. That is the first point. So, I mean, we need to tackle that a bit. But if you want to ask what the youth can do right now, I just want to say that the youths can participate in this exercise by involving themselves in civil society organizations, though it seems difficult to salvage the situation, but to come in to play a role of peacemakers, and more so, edifying the people, because knowledge is virtue. Edifying the people at all times through their social media pages. When you go and sit now, you see 5 youths, 10 youths sitting somewhere, they talk about football from morning to evening in an armed conflict zone. And you know, so I mean, why not seize 1 or 2 minutes
it's not
there?
Because of what you just said, that the lack of jobs.
Yes, why not seize 1 or 2 minutes there to be able to, you know, edify through social media and communication? And I will just close by taking a popular phenomenon. When they say there's ghost town, let me tell you how this thing happens. You just get up and go to Munya market to go and buy food. Somebody say, I hear say morning a ghost town. And then you enter the taxi, you say, I hear 2 supermarkets say Monday a ghost town. And that's how he starts going to the offices and everywhere. What happens? On Monday,
there's ghost town.
What happens is that everybody first of all watches and then sends the ear out. And in the process of everybody sending the air out to check who can go out, finally nobody goes out, and it means that there is ghost town. There is a problem that the other people, that is the secessionists, are having effective control of the people on ground through fear. The people are panicking, and you cannot expect to...
But the fear is real, eh?
The fear is real. But the problem is that our state expects us to play, to find ourselves in a dicey situation, as you said. If I have to open the store, or I don't have to open it. Or you tell me, for example, come to school on Monday at the University of Boya, and I tell you, you are living up there, gendarmes are protecting you, I'm living maybe in my 16. I don't know when I return, what will be my fate.
Thank you. This on Christel, Movement for Democracy, Development and Transparency, probably he talked about the fact that young people should get engaged. But one of such organizations is Movement for Democracy, Development and Transparency. What have they been doing within this ambit of the armed conflict?
Thank you very much. Before I start to explain what MDDC Cameroon has been doing, I would like to applaud the panelist members here present for not being biased in everything they have said. I must say it's a very educative session, and I believe that viewers have picked up 1 or 2 things. And also, I would like to appreciate all other civil society officers for all the work they have been doing. My grandmother always said that when person not clap for you, clap for yourself like lizard. So I would like to appreciate all civil society officers for all the work they have been doing out there. Now, MTC Cameroon, what they have done so far. MTC Cameroon stands for the Movement for Democracy, Development and Transparency in Cameroon, which is a non-for-profit organization with headquarters in Boya and a branch in Yaoundé, and also with focal points all over the territory. It was founded by Honorable Andrew Akonte, and we have as national coordinator Barrister Clifford Niba Akonte. It is very important to say that, sorry?
Now, what have you people been doing?
MTC Cameroon have believed that it is time for us to take into consideration being solution-oriented rather than diving into the problems again. And in part of being solution-oriented, MTC Cameroon utilizes the OSAF funding, that is Open Society Africa funding, to execute its project on strategic advocacy on civilian protection and the right to security. And we started by identifying the 10 hotspots amidst this crisis. And these 10 hotspots include Manfe, Muyoka, you have Kumba, you have Tombe, you have Bamenda. In Bamenda, you have Bali, Bafut, Kwen, and Mum. And
Ekona is not there.
Ekona is there, sir. And once we identify these 10 hotspots, we selected focal points in these various hotspots and train them. These focal points are our gatekeepers. They give us information, they help us to sensitize the communities. MDT went forward through regional symposiums to organize a regional symposium in Boya and another one in Bamenda. The regional symposium in Boya, which had more than 500 participants, there present MDT invited important stakeholders, important persons to come and give talks on civilian protection and security rights. We had Professor Samalang Irene herself. She was there to educate the people. We had Mr. Tambetiko. He was there himself. We also had many barristers, many magistrates, and also students from all over the territory which came for that symposium in Boya. MCC also went forward through sensitizing and mobilizing community by carrying out cultural activities and also religious activities, where we go to all these communities and sensitize them more on what civilian protection is all about and how they themselves should learn to protect themselves. MDC also carry out religious activities by going to churches and sensitizing these people there. MDC also have a mass messaging platform where we have reached out to over 100,000 youths through this mass messaging platform by sending out information to them and telling them how important it is for them to always protect themselves and also to counter misinformation in our country. MCC Cameroon also, from an educative perspective, write manuals, toolkits, and also newsletter. We have as our recent newsletter, Protect Our Own. In this newsletter there, we clearly stated out what civilian protection is all about, what security rights are, and also we made possible recommendations to stakeholders and also to non-stakeholders on how they can protect themselves and go about all of this. MZT also, through traditional and non-traditional media platforms, have reached out to approximately 2 million persons, engaging them on how to foster peace and also to always remember that it is important for us as civilians to protect ourselves and also for us not to breach the right to security.
Now, let me just take on this message so that I get to Barrister and also so we prepare to run away about 12 or 13 minutes or so. Good day to you all in the Studio House of Commons. This is one of the best programs in Cameroon. Firstly, to protect civilians, the general controlling the joint military region, including Littoral Southwest region, who is in the southwest in the name of General Eko Ngwese, should control its commanders in the southwest, like the Legion commander in Boya, to control the troops in the area, and if any go rough, they should be punished publicly so that the crime or malpractice should not repeat itself. There is no state without civilians, and if the pain get to another level, it will come along with another level of humanitarian crisis. Noni writing from Boya. Barrister, we are running up now. I want to ask, what recommendation, you are a senior lawyer who is well read and also have been a judge in the Gambia, and now what recommendation are you giving to the government and to the armed group in terms of protection of civilians? What are the recommendations you are giving?
No, I cannot give recommendations to the armed groups, because traditionally these are ghost authorities. You don't talk to a ghost. I can only speak to the government that is duly constituted to protect and guarantee security. And my message to the government is that they should engage in sincere dialogue. The problem in this country is a clash of culture, a clash of cultural values.
You just had a major national dialogue. Are you seeing that?
I am saying that if you look at the participants, I was a participant at the national dialogue, but you would see that a sizable and important chunk of the stakeholders were not there. When you come and dialogue with me, you dialogue with the government, CPDM, SDF, that's not a problem. The core cause of this issue, the stakeholders are known. If the government were to engage dialogue with Cho Ayaba, who is known, Akwanga Ebenezer, who is known,
Komesako
and all those figures, you know, Chris Anudem, they are known. These are the kind of people that the government should dialogue with. When I talk about dialogue, I'm talking about sincere dialogue. Our country is facing a crisis. We cannot restore peace. We cannot talk about security of the person. We cannot talk about national security without dialogue, engaging in some very sincere dialogue with these people. Take out, how do they call this man, Sisiku from prison. Take out Eyambe from prison. Take out Barrister Shufai from prison.
And all possible
political prisoners. Take them out and engage in constructive dialogue with them. Why did they go underground? That is the question. And I think that once that dialogue is had, let me even say one thing, the recommendations of the National Dialogue have not even been implemented. When we argue that magistrates of French-speaking expression who do not master the common law should not be allowed to practice here, they imposed on us the present Procureur General, who is a French-trained magistrate with no knowledge of the common law. He sees the common law as a fiction. To him, the common law is a fiction. Get me very well. And that is why we have a breakdown of the rule of law in the Southwest. Because from the Napoleonic system of law, you know, it is the Procureur General qui a le pouvoir. In the common law concept, it is the courts. And so I've just gave you one direct example where you see the PG calls a bench magistrate to his office to give him instructions.
When the proceedings are ongoing?
When the proceedings are ongoing. I'm saying something that happened in my presence.
Verifiable.
Me, I'm the eyewitness account of that. And then you see that there is truly a clash of culture.
Okay.
And that is why I'm saying that if we are able to hold constructive, reasonable, in fact, I even followed at one time, there was a process being led by the PM, by the Prime Minister, some Canadian talks that were ongoing. We thought that was going to bring a solution to this problem. But again, it got hooked up somewhere. So that is what I'm recommending.
Is that the state should engage in frank, honest, and genuine dialogue.
On the line, the kind of talks that they were engaging with the Canadian authorities.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Mabel Epusndang, what are your recommendations in terms of the protection of civilians?
Yes, I strongly recommend that civilian protection should be enhanced on by the government. The government should, or should I say the military, like what we have now, should deter from making civilians victims rather than protecting them. They should not be vulnerable. And I equally recommend that the civilian environment should not be targeted, because the consequences of what is going on now would be faced in the long run. destruction, damages, severe losses. Those are the effects. We may not see it now, but in the future. So civilian environments and civilians should be free. They should not be targets by the military. And as usually what happens is they always come after the show. Yes, they come after the scene and pick up
and then beat those who are
there. The rule of law should be enforced to the latter.
Briefly, I know we're out of time, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. So, for me, I'm just proposing that the first thing is that let us, if we suppose that none of this is heard and that the status quo doesn't change, let everybody make sure first that they are civilians according to the definition that we have given. Don't play or take part in hostilities. Let it be for the politicians or for those who are fighting. If you take the other role, then you lose that freedom that is already attached to you by the international.
But you also gain the other one of first convention,
okay,
second,
that's going to be their personal drawing.
Doctor,
the second
I would have
one
disagreed with you.
Okay. The
but
second,
not now, not today.
Okay, the second one is that each person should try to educate themselves on the laws on civilian protection and more about security rights, and be familiar with the institutions and then the procedures or the modus operandi that they have to take if they find themselves in a contrary situation. And then the third is that each person should try to be in conformity with the law as much as possible. That is, if you have to be somewhere with your ID card, try to be. And if you are being stopped for a control, stop. And try as much as possible to be within the norms. And then CSO leaders like MDTC Cameroon are encouraged to continue in their salutary endeavor. They educate the masses through their symposiums with their toolkits. We are giving them a hand of salutation and encouraging all other NGOs in that light. The government should help the people to believe in them once more by ensuring the independence of the judicial system and their capacity to ensure that the constitution is respected to the latter. Let them allow the system to do it. And then finally, in a tight break situation, as we spoke about the diocese situation, wherein you do not know whether you should.
we are out of time.
Okay, thank you.
But we have the Minister of Territorial Administration that says Cameroon is a state of law. Maybe Barrister will have to differ on that. Briefly.
Okay, as recommendation to CSOs, I want to encourage them to continue the advocacy they are doing, and also to the government, they should also fund CSOs. They should also endeavor that the laws on civilian protection go throughout the national territory. To community and religious leaders, I will plead with them to collaborate with CSOs in carrying out activities. To journalists, I recommend that they should endeavor to send out vital informations and valid ones at that. And also to the youths, I will recommend that they should learn the laws, all the laws regulating civilian protection and the right to security. The youth should learn these laws, and they should try to put themselves at positions where they are not going to be held as victims, and they should try to avoid problems for themselves. And to civilians, I will pray that they should try to collaborate with the government and also be safe at all times.
Okay, we have just 1 minute. I don't know who will take this between doctor and barrister. If somebody drops the arm, go to the DDR center and continue on Facebook streaming, insulting the other side, and is saying that we know you, will send this country. Where is that person classified? Is that person a civilian or a militia?
You see, there are different forms of militia. You have government militia, and you have that. I think that the government is using the wrong method. When you come to surrender, it means you have surrendered your ideas, you have surrendered everything. You have to be neutralized, rather than using you now as it rather radicalizes other people.
So that person has not dropped the arms.
No,
it's part of
arms is not just this thing you carry.
If you come into the territory of the opposing party, and then you're giving information to, you're a spy.
And you are doing Facebook streaming.
You're a spy. You are a spy, and therefore
you don't need to carry arms.
And therefore you'll be.
In fact, you are more dangerous
Okay.
than the man who carries the arms.
I wanted to get that because somebody asked that question. I said, thank you, Dr. Mabel. Thank you, Senior Barrister Nkea. Of course, Christelle, thank you very much. And of course, Gabriel, it's been a 1 hour, 30-minute ride with you guys. I want to thank all those who have sent us your messages. We didn't have time to take on the messages. Subsequently, maybe next edition or so, we may have time to dissect on some of the program. I'm happy with your reactions about today's program that is very educative, and I'm happy also that it's transforming the minds on those who are watching us on social media platform. Happy birthday to you, Elma, and many more years to you. May the good God continue to guide you as you celebrate your birthday this year. And this program comes out every Sunday at exactly 12 to 1:30, rebroadcast today 10:30 p.m. You can follow our YouTube channel on BT Media Group, also Facebook BT Media Group, My Media Prime BT Media Group, X formerly known as Twitter BT Media Group. I leave you with this: no matter the matter, what matters is your matter. As Jesus Christ said, my peace I leave you, my peace I give you. And he looked not on our sin days, look on your faith, and the faith of the peace-loving people spread around the world. So what matters for you is that you should be a peacemaker and stay out of trouble. My name is Tah Mai Jarvis from Camus Commercial Capital, Douala. Bye-bye.